Welcome back, everybody, to the PFF NFL show. Trevor, Sikkema, Dalton, Wasserman here with you guys for another offseason topic, which includes all 32 NFL teams that we are going to be talking about today. And we're digging into the biggest make or break player for every single team. Now, I love this topic, one, because it's fun to look at, but also there's a lot of different ways that you can go about this. Dalton, you wrote the article over at PFF.com, which I don't think is out yet, so I think people are getting the first look at what you think of these teams right here on this show, and then we'll have the article out a little bit later this week. But there's a lot of different ways that you could do this. You could go, okay, is it purely contractual? Obviously, are teams or players into a contract year? Or is it more situations of like, hey, we're halfway through a rookie contract, we're halfway through a big contract, and it's basically a make or break season as to whether or not the team is going to commit to you moving forward. Sometimes that involves even the highest position of quarterbacks. So there's a lot of fun guys to look at, a lot of really cool angles that I think that you took about with this exercise. So how you doing, my friend? I'm excited to dig into this here with you.
Good. I believe this article is going to be coming out online tomorrow, Trevor, so they can get the written version of it tomorrow on the website. But yeah, no, you're right. It's a lot of different angles about, look, sometimes it's going to be a guy who's going to be crucial to his team's success this year. Sometimes it's a guy with his career kind of at a crossroads, is entering that contract year or kind of a make or break year individually. So there were a lot of different angles to take on this, but it was fun to put together, and you realize when you look at this group of names, you go, these are really some guys who could change the outlook, not just of their teams, but of the entire league, right? And when we look at offseason expectations and going into 2025, it's going to be a lot of fun to see the progress of all 32 of them during the season.
Sometimes when we go through these exercises and we talk about like hypotheticals of guys who could be on the move or players who, teams are obviously going to commit a lot of money to, I think that sometimes fan bases and fans go like, oh, there's no way they'd move on from this guy. Like, they're not even thinking about it. If the NFL teaches us anything every single offseason, it's that there are a lot more players that are not as untouchable as you might think. So I think that this is a fun way to sort of introduce if they play really well, maybe they're here for a long time. If they don't, maybe they're wearing a different jersey, putting on a different helmet next season. We're going to be talking about a lot of different stats and data points, certainly as we talk about the contracts and values and where guys are. If you want to see a lot of that for yourself, you can go over to PFF.com, get yourself a PFF Plus subscription. You can see all the premium stats right there for every single position. You can tie those into some contractual data that we're using over the cap as a sort of a baseline point for how we're looking at these contracts and what their value is and how much time is left, how flexible they are. And you could see all of that, and you could see some trends with PFF grades and performances to really come up with your own conclusions here for this topic that we're going to dig into. We're going to go in alphabetical order by city, just because that's how you have it. So I'm just letting everybody know, which starts us out here with the Arizona Cardinals. And you are coming out swinging on this one. You said the biggest make or break player for the Arizona Cardinals, a team that's ascending here, a team that I think a lot of people have some faith in, maybe even making some playoff noise this season. But you have their quarterback, Kyler Murray, as the biggest make or break player here. Now, he's under contract for another, how many years does he have left on his contract here? I just looked this up. He's got 4 years left on his deal, although the last 2 years are pretty flexible. This is somebody who I think a lot of people think has the talent to be a franchise quarterback, but you have him on the make or break list here. So break it down for me here. Why Kyler Murray for the Arizona Cardinals to kick things off?
Yeah, so there's 4 years left on the contract, but realistically, when you're talking about guaranteed money, it's really 2, and even next year, if they wanted to eat the 2026 part of the money and find a way to trade him or some other way to get rid of him, they could do that. Look, Kyler Murray's a weird one because last year had an 82.2 PFF grade, which is really good, but you and I talked about all season the inconsistencies that come with him, right? When he's hot, he looks like one of the 3 to 5 best quarterbacks in football, and when he's cold, the whole offense just seems to stop, especially the passing game, right? We know they have a dynamic running game with him and James Conner and Trey Benson, everything they have going on there. The defense is getting better. They worked on it a lot this offseason. Jonathan Gannon's trying to build that. To me, actually leading off here, I think Kyler Murray's the biggest make or break player in the entire league because you could see a scenario where the Cardinals get into the postseason, right? You can see an improved defense, a dynamic running game, Marvin Harrison Jr. breaking out in year 2. Trey McBride's one of the best tight ends in football, but it's all about Kyler Murray. Last year, Trevor, Kyler Murray had at least a 70 passing grade in 6 games, and the Cardinals won 5 out of those 6 games. The other 11 games when he didn't hit that, they went 3-8. So him balancing out the passing game with his arm, and we've seen it in the past. There was a year, that year where he looked like an MVP candidate, where he led the league in big-time throw rate. He can make big plays down the field vertically, but it's just the consistency. It's week to week. Which Kyler Murray are you getting, right? It's not necessarily the same guy you're getting, especially in the passing game every week. So I think when it comes to make or break, I think both for the team and for himself, deciding, okay, is this really a franchise quarterback that we want for those 4 years that you just mentioned and beyond that into his 30s? Is this a guy that can take us into championship contention? I think you find out a lot of that this year with this team continuing to improve, with Jonathan Gannon continuing to build the defense. And then, again, a Marvin Harrison breakout would help a lot. You've got Trey McBride, an elite tight end. You've got an elite running game. Everything else is in place for Kyler Murray to succeed. He just really needs to do it on a week-to-week basis, because we haven't seen that consistency every single week in a long time.
Yeah, no, I agree with you here. And it's not just getting to those last 2 years of that contract. After this year, moving him gets pretty flexible. Like, yeah, he's around $50 million. I can't remember if it's like 53, high 40, something like that. Like, he's right around $50 million on the cap for really the rest of these 4 years. I think the last 2 are somewhere with around the 45 range. But you're paying a good chunk of change for a quarterback here. It's not like it's bargain bin, although maybe depending on how much the salary cap goes up in the next couple of quarterback contracts, maybe it feels like that. But all that to say, he gets movable. He gets very flexible and movable after this season. And so that's really how you have to look at this situation. Is you look at what the Cardinals have been building over the last couple of off seasons. They're really ready to hit the gas pedal here. They are a team that, 8 games into the season, halfway through the regular season last year, they were first in their division. They were right there. They had good momentum. And so it's not like this team is really far away. And they're getting to the point where they've got a lot of really nice rookie contracts that they can build off of moving forward. Darius Robinson, Marvin Harrison Jr., Michael Wilson, Trey Benson, guys from this year. Like, you're looking at Walter Nolan, you're looking at Will Johnson. You look at guys like Max Melton, Garrett Williams, right? Like, there's just a ton of players who are young, and they're ready to sort of usher in that next wave of Arizona Cardinal players. Do they want Kyler Murray to be that quarterback? Because I think for this year, he's really got to show more consistency, or at least you start to open the door, like a situation where, look at last year, right? This is a perfect example. The Rams say to Matthew Stafford, yeah, you can go find a deal somewhere else, and we'll see if we can match it. Like, on the surface level, them trading Matthew Stafford is crazy, but it happens because that's the business end of how the NFL goes. And so, as crazy as it might seem to be, like, the Cardinals would never give up on Kyler Murray. What are you guys talking about? I think that it is a pretty big make or break year, because they are going in the right direction with their roster in basically every other way. Do they believe that Kyler Murray is going to be the guy to lead them into the promised land and into multiple playoff seasons moving forward? I think this year will tell us a lot about that. I think that this is sort of unfair. I wouldn't choose this player over Kyler Murray, but Darius Robinson, not a make or break in terms of like, if he doesn't show up next year, it's over for him, because he's only going into his second year in the league. But 53.4 run defense grade last year, 48.4 pass rush grade. He's got some help this year. I'd like to see Darius Robinson specifically as a run defender. Let's get something at least above 70.0. Would love to see something above 75. Would obviously love to see something in the 80s from him as a run defender this upcoming season. So not a make or break, but you would like to see something like that out of your first round pick. The Atlanta Falcons, you went with the classic Kyle Pitts, We will never give up on him. I'm done with him. It's all the fantasy football memes that you could see, and you end up having Kyle Pitts here as the choice here for the Falcons still. Talk to me about Pitts.
Yeah, I mean, individually, there's a reason you've heard even trade rumors about him recently, because he's just underperformed compared to being the 4th overall pick and everything that he was expected to be as a receiver. Specifically, this past year, just a 63.9 receiving grade. That was by far his career low. So things have not gotten better as the years have gone on for Pitts, and this is really his last chance in his 5th NFL season to make things happen for himself, right? He doesn't have much impact as a blocker, so another team isn't going to sign him for that. He needs to show some flashes as a receiver, whether he's going to shine in the future with Atlanta with Michael Penix or elsewhere and make some money as a receiving tight end elsewhere. But Kyle Pitts, I mean, it's been said enough in Atlanta at this point that Kyle Pitts has been kind of a disappointment as things have gone on beyond his rookie year when he had 1,000 yards. But this is really the last chance here in Atlanta. You've got Michael Penix, you've got got a quarterback that can work the ball vertically. Now you've got Drake London outside, Darnell Mooney outside. You should be able to find some open targets. If he can't find them this year and put up numbers with a full season of Penix this year, not really sure when he's going to do it. So I think individually for Kyle Pitts' career, he's really at a crossroads of this being his last chance to prove he can be a star tight end.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think this one it is the right choice when you just look at this Falcons roster. Everybody else is either under contract, they've committed to these guys, or they're rookies and they're just younger players who are still ascending, and it's a little too early for that. But Kyle Pitts is absolutely the choice here for the Atlanta Falcons. For the Baltimore Ravens, you went with offensive guard Daniel Falele. Now, I think that some of the draft choices that they've had and maybe some of the reinforcements of guys who might be nipping at his heels might be a reason for that. But is that the main catalyst of why you picked Falele here for the Ravens?
Well, it's a couple of reasons. That is a good reason because they drafted several guys behind that could take his job next year if he's gone, or even this year if something falters. But I think even last year, you forget, as I believe he was a former fourth-round pick, it's the last year of his rookie deal. He's entering a contract year this year, too. Spent his first 2 seasons as a backup tackle before moving to guard last year. 61.8 PFF grade isn't that bad for a guy who's playing his first year at the position. He was never a guard, I don't believe, at Minnesota either. So when you're talking about a guy who, for the Ravens, interior offensive line, probably their biggest weakness last year, especially these guard spots, and you're looking at Falele and probably Andrew Voorhees on that other side, along with all those rookies they have competing behind him. So it's going to be a crucial spot this year. They need big improvement from him this year for the success of their team. And then entering a contract year, if he can get to a point where he's grading, say, in the mid to high 70s, we've seen what those types of guards can get in free agency, so anywhere from 15 to 20 million a year. So it's a big year for him and trying to make money into his second contract. But also for the Ravens, I think the interior of this offensive line, except for obviously Tyler Linderbaum, who's a star, these 2 guard spots are maybe the biggest concern on the entire team. So he's got to be better in his second year as a starter for the Ravens. And then entering that contract year, he could be in line for big money next offseason, or he could be in line for backup money, $3-4 million a year that the backup guards usually get as veterans. But it's a big year both for him and the team when it comes to that offensive line.
Yeah, I think there's some other conversations that you can kind of bring to the table here. The reasons that you listed with Falele, I think they are probably the most make or break if you're saying true to sort of the exercise that we're doing here. Zay Flowers, a little bit, if you think about the exercise a little bit differently, because I think we are entering a time where he is going to take the number one receiver type of attention. When I say that, I mean, even away from Mark Andrews a little bit. I think that Mark Andrews is going to start to, his target share and his threat percentage is going to start to go down a little bit. I think you're going to see Isaiah Likely get a little bit more targets this upcoming season. I think you're going to see them lean into Zay Flowers even a little bit more. And so make or break, again, for Zay Flowers, it's not really true to those exact terms and that exact title, but sort of him becoming that, hey, can we really focus our passing attack through Zay Flowers? I think that'll be an interesting thing to monitor here for the Ravens this upcoming season. And then similarly to Falele, Travis Jones, also in the last year of his rookie contract, he has been solid over the last 2 years for them, especially as a run defender. But it's a little bit of a make or break here, not because I think he's going to be trash and they're not going to think about resigning him at all, but if he continues to play the way that he has, it's sort of limbo for him. The Ravens could bring him back, or maybe they could let him walk if they think that they could replace him with another guy who can do what he is doing at a rookie contract level. And so I think he's sort of in that in-between right now, where he's a good run defender, but how much can he bring them in the pass rushing category as well? So it's a little bit of a make or break for Travis Jones. Not that he's going to be in or out of the league, but more of a make or break. Hey, how much are the Baltimore Ravens going to prioritize you? Because remember, they're paying Nnamdi Madubuike on that interior defensive line a good chunk of change. So do you think that paying 2 interior defensive linemen is the right way to allocate your salary cap and your resources there? So I would just also throw his name out in that situation. For the Buffalo Bills, you went with one of their cornerstones, one of the guys who they have built their defense around, and somebody who, when he is on the field and healthy, he's fantastic in Matt Milano. So I think that some people might be surprised to see Matt Milano on this list, but ultimately, why did you go with him as the make or break candidate for the Bills?
Look, and there's multiple reasons the Bills' coverage has struggled over the last couple of years, especially last year where they had the second worst coverage grade in the league as a team. But a big one for me is, look, Matt Milano at one point was the captain of this defense, and especially in coverage over the middle of the field, that's where things have really faltered. I like what the Bills have done on the defensive line this offseason. I like the fit of Maxwell Hairston as their CB2 across from Christian Benford, but it's middle of the field coverage that is going to decide this. They got shredded over the middle in the playoffs, both by Baltimore and Kansas City. And a big reason for that is Matt Milano is just not the same as he was a couple of years ago, right? He's only played 544 snaps over the last 2 years. He had a 45 coverage grade last year when he did come back. Granted, he got back late, and then he basically dove right into the postseason, so he probably wasn't 100% still after all the injuries he's had, but this is someone they really need. If they're going to shore up that middle of the field coverage, they need Milano for one more year at least to be prime Matt Milano, especially in coverage, if they're going to make a Super Bowl run. Otherwise, they improved at corner, they improved on the D-line, but we're going to be looking at linebacker and safety as the key positions the Bills need to improve. They re-signed Terrell Bernard, so you have stability at one linebacker spot. They need a full, healthy season of prime Matt Milano, at least one more, to give themselves a chance to really make a Super Bowl run, because you know me, Josh Allen's good enough to win a Super Bowl. The offense is good enough to win a Super Bowl. It's this defense, it's this coverage unit over the middle. That's my biggest concern, and a healthy prime Milano would go a long way towards fixing that.
Yeah, I think that Milano is sort of the choice here as the make or break player for the Bills, right? Like what you said, like their outlook, their potential, what they could be as a team. I'd throw Keon Coleman in there, and again, it's not necessarily like if he doesn't ascend to an incredible level, like his career's over, they're going to move on from him. It's just his second year on his rookie contract, but I think it's kind of a make or break, because if he is the wide receiver that they want him to be, this alpha, this wide receiver one caliber type of X receiver, I think we'll see it this year. I really do. Last year, he had over 600 yards receiving. He had almost 20% of the threat percentage on the team. So they used him quite a bit. But with that being the baseline, let's ascend to above 20%, above maybe 23%, something around 25 or above when it comes to that threat percentage, how often he is being targeted on the routes that he is running. Let's get over 1,000 yards receiving. And I know there's a lot of mouths to feed in that offense, but again, if Coleman is sort of the player that a lot of people, Bills fans, draft fans who are big fans of Keon Coleman, he's the player that they want him to be, I genuinely think we will see it this year. So to me, it's more of a make than it is a break for Coleman, because if he has another season similar to what we saw this past year, it's fine. It's not a big deal. I think that's fine. But in the make or break, if you focus on the word make, if this guy can really take that next step and be that wide receiver one, I think it just takes Buffalo's offense to the next level, especially with his skill set. So for me, you talk about the defense achieving its potential with Matt Milano. I think the offense can achieve its highest potential if Keon Coleman becomes the obvious player where it's like, we have to get this guy the ball every single week. And so I would throw his name in there with sort of that point of view or that conversation there for Buffalo as well. The Carolina Panthers, you went with Derek Brown, who is coming off of a season where he only played in one game due to injury, and he missed the rest of the season. And very clearly, I think they've spent the rest of this offseason building around getting Derek Brown back and healthy, because he was an elite player. He had an elite grade the year prior. They're hoping that he comes back to form, and they're hoping that the cavalry is here for him on the defensive line, and it's no longer just him, that he can really be used as a 0 technique nose tackle, a 3 technique defensive tackle. Heck, they could even put him on a 4-eye or a 5 technique defensive end when they want to, when Ejiro Evero, their defense coordinator, wants to get creative. So you ended up going with Derek Brown here. Talk to me about why he was the choice.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, they've done a lot to add to this defense, right? When you talk about Tershawn Wharton and Bobby Brown and Pat Jones and re-signing Mike Jackson and drafting D lineman, drafting Lathan Ransom, Trayvon Merrick gets safety as well. Look, everything, it's all great moves. but none of it matters if Derek Brown is not back and being the star of this defense, right? 2 years ago, he had the second best run defense grade among defensive tackles in the NFL. You said it the right way. It is built around him now, and this Panthers team, other than Bryce Young developing, which is always the most important thing, your quarterback, fixing this run defense that was historically bad last year, it starts with Derek Brown getting back healthy and being the star that we know he can be, and then all of the complementary pieces and even all the pass rush pieces can fall right into place around him on this defensive line. That's where they're hoping for the biggest improvement this year, is on this D-line, but it starts with the one incumbent guy that you mentioned only played one game last year. If he can put up somewhere, I mean, even if it's not a 90 PFF grade like he had 2 years ago in run defense, if it's somewhere in the 80s and we know he's a star-level player in run defense, this is a whole different defense, a whole different front seven you're talking about with Derek Brown back in there. That's going to be the biggest factor of success for their defense this season. Not all the new additions, it's all of the new additions around Derek Brown being the star that we know he can be.
Yeah, I think that Derek Brown is the answer there. Maybe you could throw out J.C. Horn because he played a fully healthy season. Well, not a fully healthy season. I think he missed one game, but he played over 1,000 snaps last season, but it was his lowest coverage grade, so you need to bounce back from him because you're going to build your coverage around what J.C. Horn can do. But I agree. I think they build basically the entire defense around what Derek Brown can do. So I do think that you are right. This is a make-or-break season for him. I'll throw out Xavier Legette. Again, not that I think that his career is over if he doesn't have a better season this upcoming year, but he had the most receiving snaps on the team, the most targets on the team, and yet just below 500 yards, still didn't have a 20% threat percentage, had 8 drops on the season and just a 59.1 receiving grade. Now this team goes out, and I think if they had more faith in Xavier Legette, they don't draft Tetro McMillan at number 8. Now, that's not to say a reality wouldn't have existed where they wouldn't have done both, because I think the idea long-term of having Legette and T-Mac and Jatavian Sanders and Jalen Coker, like, that is a really good thought process and reality that they could manifest there. But it requires Xavier Legette to play a lot better than he did the previous season. And with McMillan there, I've talked about this, is why I like the T-Mac selection so much, is that if you put McMillan as the wide receiver 1 on this team, it allows Xavier Legette to not have to take on all of the X on the line of scrimmage duties for you. He can be more of that wide receiver 2. Adam Thielen can be much more of a slot wide receiver for you. The same for Jalen Coker. But if Xavier Legette cannot up his efficiency and his impact as a wide receiver 2 this upcoming year, now we start to get a little bit nervous, because as much as they spend a lot of money on defense, and we talked about them in improving the defensive side of the ball, Dalton, this is still about answering the Bryce Young question of whether or not he is the franchise quarterback. Now, he was fantastic from week 10 on last year. We've talked about that so many times on this show. But this upcoming year is still about, hey, we've got to go pedal to the metal while we have this guy on a rookie contract. And if Legette does not improve from what we saw in a rookie season, they will probably look to add another wide receiver, because Adam Thielen, he's not going to play forever. He's in the twilight of his career. Jalen Coker, for as good as he is, he was an undrafted free agent, so I don't know how much they're going to lean into him. All of a sudden, it's a sneaky big second year for Xavier Legette, especially with them drafting Tetro McMillan in the first round. Kevin had a couple of back and forths here for us in the chat as we had the show going on. He said, going back to the Baltimore Ravens talk, Falele with a career year loading. In 2026, he's a free agent. He signs with the Chargers to form the largest offensive line in the history of the game. And so I think that that's something that Jim Harbaugh would absolutely love, to form a great wall in front of Justin Herbert there with the Los Angeles Chargers. Also agreed with you that the Bills live in nickel defense, and Milano makes that work. So Milano is a key piece of what they want to do on defense. And then he also agrees if Coleman hits, it puts all the other wide receivers in their proper roles in Buffalo. And I do agree with that. Shout out to Donnie as well, $2 super chat. We appreciate you, Donnie. Said the GOATs are back. Salute to you. We appreciate that. As an Arizona Cardinals fan, K1 is on the hot seat. Wow. Going as far as to say hot seat. We said make or break. Hot seat's another level, but Donnie's letting it fly here in the chat here early on in this show. The Chicago Bears, speaking of letting it fly, I talked about a couple of guys entering their second year of their rookie contracts, and it's like, all right, I don't know if it's make or break here. You're going straight for it. Caleb Williams, make or break season, second year in the league, Talk to me about why you landed on Caleb Williams here.
Look, it's not that he's going to be going anywhere after this year. He's going to play out, obviously, the entirety of this rookie contract. But you could not build a better supporting cast than the Bears have done this offseason between the play caller in Ben Johnson, the revamped offensive line with Dahlman, Tooney, and Jackson. You've added Colston Loveland, one of the premier tight ends in the draft. You added Luther Burden, one of the premier slot receivers in the draft, to replace Keenan Allen. The only thing this team really didn't do this offseason was add a starting caliber running back, but they're going to go with the committee of Swift and Johnson and maybe Kyle Monungai too. This is all on Caleb Williams. Whatever the Bears' success or failures are this year, last year you could blame the situation. The coaching situation was rough. There was a lot of flaws still on both sides of the ball. But offensively, there's really no reason we should see Caleb Williams struggle again unless it's just his own performance and missing throws. And look, 63.5 passing grade last year, 29th out of 32 quarterbacks that had at least 300 dropbacks. And you look at just look at what's around him and you go, there's no excuses left. I think that's the best way that I can put this is if they falter on offense, it's going to be because of Caleb Williams, I think, unless these offensive linemen suddenly get old on the inside and they're not what they used to be on other teams. But that's where I'm at with this, is I think Ben Johnson, his number one job this year is to get Caleb Williams to play on time and in rhythm. And the more that he can do that within the offense and the play calling that we know he brought to Detroit, the more they can do that, the better chance they have to make the postseason and maybe even make a postseason run with all the offensive talent they have. But this is on Caleb Williams. And I know it's too often I'm in the boat that quarterbacks are often blamed for success or failure. It's too much to a certain degree because everybody looks at the quarterback, but I think that is the case with the Bears. I think it's all on his shoulders, and it's all about Ben Johnson getting him to improve and play on time more often than he did last year and even than he did at USC.
Donnie is saying that Rome Odunze, so just speaking of Chicago, going to be the wide receiver one on this team. So in terms of a make or break, he's betting on the make part of it. Despite a small sample size, this is Donnie again saying this. He actually led all wide receivers with at least 90 targets and contested catch rate at 72%. I mean, Rome Odunze, when I watched Rome the year before he was draft eligible, I came away being like, yeah, he moves really well for a player of his size, but I wish he was better at contested catches. And this was the year prior to his final year at Washington. And then at Washington, that final year, he was so much better in those situations. I mean, he had more opportunities. He converted better. I mean, the percentage was so much higher. And now we're getting into the NFL, and it's like, okay, this is now a major part of your identity. So whatever I saw from him as a sophomore, that was him truly growing as a wide receiver, because now he does the big wide receiver stuff while also doing this surprise things of being a really fluid mover and a really good route runner for his size. So, Rome's, I think, a big breakout season for Rome Odunze as well. There's a lot of mouths to feed in that offense, but I think Rome Odunze is one of them that is going to get fed. The only other one that I'd shout out here for the Chicago Bears is Tyreek Stevenson. Entering year 3 of his rookie deal. Back-to-back seasons where he had coverage grades below 60. So if he has another year where he's not great in coverage, okay, well, all of a sudden you start to really look at drafting somebody else and prioritizing that position and probably upgrading in that area. The next team is the Cincinnati Bengals, and you went with their safety, Geno Stone, who was disappointing coming over from Baltimore. So was it really just the fact that he sort of wasn't living up to what they hoped when they signed him?
Yeah, I mean, what you have with Stone is last year a guy who comes to Cincinnati, and his first year, it's the worst year of his career. But it's the sign of hope that with Al Golden coming in as their defensive coordinator, I think if anybody in this defense is going to benefit from the defensive coordinator switch, it's Geno Stone, right? And you look at how he's always been more comfortable as that single high free safety. Well, nobody in college football last year ran more single high defenses than Al Golden at Notre Dame on the way to a national title runner-up against Ohio State, losing the national title game. But they did a lot of that with single high defenses, a lot of cover one. Maybe they won't run as high a rate of man coverage with the Bengals, but I think if they get into more of that single high style of defense than Lou Anarumo used to, he ran a lot of cover two, really mixed up the zone looks a lot. I think Stone can be a lot more comfortable in his career. An 83.3 coverage grade in single high defenses. His grades when it's anything else is in the mid 60s, right? And I think it's just a better fit in Golden's defense. He can play kind of the role that Xavier Watts played last year for Notre Dame. Just be that backbone free safety. Go ball hunting back there as the center fielder, and that's where Stone is the most comfortable. He led the league in interceptions in his last year in Baltimore. I think if you can get him back to that, simplify things, let him be the center fielder, let everything else work around him and funnel the football to him, I think Stone has an opportunity to bounce back. If he he doesn't, this Bengals secondary, I think, is still in a lot of trouble because they've never been able to replace Jesse Bates after he left for Atlanta.
Yeah, I think the only other player that I'd shout out here, similar thought process in the secondary, is Dax Hill. And again, like I'm sort of bringing him up under a different viewpoint. He was great last year when they transitioned him to move to corner full time after being a safety the year prior. He had his best grades. He was his most impactful, his most confident playing at that outside cornerback spot. They also played him a little bit in the slot as well. But he only played 5 games last year. So now he's coming back in. It's like, okay, well, corner, clearly the spot for him. They were trying to figure out, is it safety, is it corner? They drafted him to be this versatile defender. Now they know he could be an outside cornerback type. He's got 2 more years left in his deal. Can he come back? Can he be fully healthy? Can he remain confident playing that outside cornerback position? And it's just more of a make or break to me, because if he continues to play well at that outside cornerback spot, now you're building part of that secondary around him and you're prepared to give him that second contract. So it's more of a, are they about to build their secondary partially around what Dax Hill is as an outside corner as part of that make or break? Hey, you looked really good in 5 games at this spot last year. Can you still look good, hopefully in a fully healthy season playing as an outside corner, and then we can build things around you after that. The Cleveland Browns, you went with offensive tackle DeJuan Jones. I agree with this completely because I have talked about this throughout the entire offseason. It feels like we are not talking enough about what the Cleveland Browns offensive line could look like a year or 2 years from now. I mean, the names that you know, Joel Bitonio, Ethan Posick, Wyatt Teller, like all of those guys could be gone 2 years from now, maybe even a year from now. I think that's a little early. I think some of them will still be there. But then you also, okay, Jedrick Wills, you didn't re-sign because he wasn't the first round pick that you expected him to be. And now, yeah, you're talking about DeJuan Jones. Like, what is DeJuan? Is he even a serviceable and starting offensive tackle for you? Because if he's not, there's another name that's going to be out there and another retooling of the offensive line in Cleveland. So I agree with you about DeJuan Jones being the choice here, because if he also does not turn into a starting caliber player for you, man, that offensive line is going to look different real quick.
Yeah, I mean, you've got 4 of the 5 starters that are going to be at least 30 years old by the time the season starts, and DeJuan Jones is the only projected starter that's not, and he's going to play left tackle where he played 3 games last year, and he had a 44 PFF grade in those 3 games. So there's a chance next year you could see an entirely different offensive line, and we were surprised that they didn't draft a single offensive lineman in this year's draft. They took 2 quarterbacks, they took 2 running backs, they went linebacker, D tackle, right, but not a single offensive lineman for very much an aging unit and one that desperately needs young talent. If there's a young talented player that is going to emerge, it would almost have to be DeJuan Jones, whether he plays on the left side or the right side or moves inside eventually or whatever he does. But right now, it's looking like he's going to start at left tackle where he struggled last year, and he's had injury issues as well. So I think if DeJuan Jones doesn't emerge as at least a starting caliber player, we could say an entirely new 5 within the next year or 2 on Cleveland's offensive line. I know we're going to talk a lot about the quarterback situation throughout the summer, but this O-line, it's concerning because you've had a lot of injuries, you've got guys aging, and there's not a whole lot of young talent to work with there.
Dallas Cowboys, they got a couple of candidates here, which we'll talk about a little bit. But you chose Mozzie Smith as the guy for the article, the guy that you wanted to highlight here the most. Obviously, it's been well documented here on this show and with the PFF grades how much he has struggled specifically in run defense over the last couple of seasons. He's slated to be their starter yet again along the interior defensive line, but I agree with you. If he is not better this year, you have to think about moving on immediately.
Yeah, no. I look, there's several guys I could have gone with. It could have been Dak Prescott coming off the injury. George Pickens was a thought. I think Tyler Guyton going into year 2 was a thought. But Mozzie Smith, I mean, through 2 years, just a 30 run defense grade, which is the 9th worst among qualified defensive tackles. And look, the Cowboys' run defense has been struggling for several years. They were 2nd worst in the league, only ahead of Carolina last year. And it's still my biggest concern. Look, this defense, I like getting Donovan Ezeraku in the draft. Marshawn Nealon coming back from injury, trying to figure it out at linebacker. Obviously, DeMarvion Overshown is going to miss a good chunk of the season, but I think they just really need Mozzie Smith or somebody on the interior here who can stop the run, because if they can't do that, they're going to get opponents like Philadelphia, like Washington, who just control just play ball control and control these ball games in the trenches. I think the offense is going to be a lot better with a healthy Prescott and with Pickens in there, but it doesn't matter if you're not on the field and you have the second worst run defense grade in the league. This is the time. This is the year for Mozzie Smith, because honestly, if he plays the way he's played the first 2 years, he may not even make it to the end of his rookie deal. He may not make it through next offseason as bad as it's been. You just can't have a guy playing significant snaps with a 30 run defense grade out there. So it's time for Mozzie Smith to show why he was a first-round pick, especially in run defense. And if he doesn't, they're going to be reconstructing that whole defensive tackle unit, I think, as well as the linebackers behind him.
Yeah, the other two that I would have mentioned was George Pickens, certainly on the last year of his contract and trading for him. And we've talked about him and sort of the impact that he could have on the Dallas Cowboys offense. I'll throw out Kaiir Elam as well, right? You acquire Kaiir Elam, you bring him in. Is he different? Very, very clearly he was not a confident football player playing in Buffalo's system. Now they're more of a quarters, zone coverage, too deep type of a coverage system there in Buffalo. And when Kaiir Elam was at Florida, a lot of what he did was press man stuff, and he liked to be in man coverage and just play cat coverage. And are they going to play more of that with him in Dallas? Does he look different? Does he look more confident? Because if he doesn't, then not only is it a make or break for him being out of the Dallas Cowboys, I don't know how much longer he's going to be in the league at that point if he can't have better success than what we saw in Buffalo, because it just straight up was not good enough with them last year. So I think he is also a candidate there that I would shout out in a make or break situation. For the Denver Broncos, you went with a newcomer here, someone who they brought in free agency, Dre Greenlaw, as the make or break candidate already. Dalton, he hasn't even played a snap yet for Denver. What do you go? This is a lot of pressure that you're putting on this guy already.
There should be, and I mean, he got the contract that kind of deserves that pressure, $15 million a year. But when you look at Denver's defense last year, right, the weakness of it was linebackers in coverage. For the most part, it was Cody Barton and Justin Strnad. Strnad is still there. Barton went to Tennessee. They had the fifth worst coverage grade, their linebacker unit in the NFL, right? We know their secondary is great. They've got Surtain, they've got Brandon Jones, now they've got Jahdae Barron back there, their first-round pick, but they need to be able to cover at linebacker. They're getting Alex Singleton back. He's a good player, especially in run defense, but Greenlaw's the key to this whole thing. And I know coming off the torn Achilles 2 Super Bowls ago, he only played 34 snaps last year, but since 2019, when he came in the league, he has the fourth best coverage grade of any linebacker in the league, only behind, I believe it's Fred Warner, Demario Davis, and I forget the third one, but when you had him and Warner over there with the 49ers, they were the best pair of coverage linebackers in the league. Now Greenlaw leaves. If he's fully healthy and this works, Denver could have the best defense in the entire league. They could have the best defense in football. If he's not healthy and they can't cover over the middle, yes, their secondary is going to be scary, but we're going to have issues covering in that second layer of the defense in that intermediate range behind those linebackers. So if he's back a full season now after the Achilles tear, and he's the Dre Greenlaw that we know he can be from San Francisco, they could be the best defense in football. It's just going to be – I think he is the biggest X factor in their entire defense. I really do, because that linebacker layer was the weakest part of their defense by far. The D-line is really deep. It's really good. The secondary is obviously really talented. You've got the Defensive Player of the Year out there. But it's that second level that can make the difference and turn this unit into an elite one.
I agree. I think that they would be my bet to be the best defense in the NFL in a lot of categories and a lot of grades, a lot of EPA per play allowed, a lot of points allowed, yards allowed, things like that. I think they're going to be fantastic there. The only other player that I would shout out as a make or break candidate is Riley Moss, who was able to start for them for, I believe, a full season, almost 1,000 snaps on defense last season, but the coverage grades weren't so great. And obviously, not only did they draft Jahdae Barron, but they've got Jaquan McMillan. They have Chris Abrams-Drain as well. And so, I think that Moss is going to be sort of an inside-out player. Like, he'll play a little bit of nickel, he'll play on the outside. It sort of depends on how they want to utilize Jahdae Barron as well. But if he is not more consistent, if he is not more reliable, they got guys waiting in the wings to be able to take his snaps. And so I think it's a big year for Riley Moss, who played a lot for them last year. And if he takes that and he gets better and he learns from it and he's more confident, has better anticipation, just all of that good stuff in his third year in the league, then I think that he could be a part of a pretty deep cornerback rotation there. But if not, I think a couple of those guys are going to start to eat into his snaps. For the Detroit Lions, some changes for them this offseason. You ended up going with offensive lineman Graham Glasgow. Graham Glasgow for them. Excuse me. So why did you end up going with him here for Detroit?
So all of a sudden you look at Frank Ragnow retiring, and I would argue he was the second best center in football behind Creed Humphrey, and now you've got some questions on the interior of this offensive line, especially with a quarterback in Jared Goff that doesn't move very much and doesn't deal with interior pressure very well. And you're looking at Glasgow, whether it's him or Tate Ratledge who's going to start at center, it looks like it's going to be those two and Christian Mahogany. So you've got a longtime veteran in Glasgow, and then you've got two other guys who have combined for 2 NFL starts, both of them by Mahogany last year. Ratledge going to be a rookie this year. He really needs to be better if they're going to solidify this interior. I know the 2 tackles with Sewell and Decker, that's one of the best pairs of tackles in the league, but you're talking about now that has major questions, I think, on the interior, especially in pass protection. Glasgow with just a 49 pass blocking grade last season. I think when you're looking at where this, I don't want to say fall apart because the Lions are still really, really talented, but if you're talking about a team with Jared Goff as your quarterback and questions with interior pass protection, this is a real issue. We don't know how they're going to align it yet, but you're going to have a rookie, you're going to have a guy who graded a 57, a PFF grade last year, and you're going to have a guy who made 2 starts last year in Mahogany, 2 really good starts, but still, he wasn't a starter last year. He was filling in next to Ragnow and a great unit they have there. So I think he's got to be that veteran, that stable veteran presence on the interior with those other 2 young guys starting.
Yeah, I think that the only other real player, I mean, you hate to say it, is Aiden, right? I mean, it's Aiden Hutchinson. I mean, like that's the only other player on this roster, which is otherwise really stacked and solid. I mean, you're still trying to figure it out along the interior offensive line like you broke down there, but Aiden Hutchinson with the make or break. Hey, what does he look like coming back from that injury? That is quite literally a make or break because their defense is built around him and him being, I don't want to say as good as he was at the beginning of last year because that was just an unbelievable rate of success that he was having as a pass rusher. Even if it's just a little bit closer to normal, a little down here with the rest of us humans, that is still fantastic for him. They just need him to be really good again, like not even as legendary as it was during the first 4 or 5 games of last season, but they just need him to get back to form. And if they do, then obviously they can move forward with the rest of that defense. But if he does not look the same, I think the entire DNA of your defense completely changes of somebody that you now need to find a guy who knows how to get after the passer to be able to chip into what Aiden Hutchinson was able to do for you last year. Green Bay Packers, you went with edge rusher Lucas Van Ness, former first-round pick, a guy who they're still trying to figure out exactly what the best position is for him, how he can best achieve his potential there as a first-rounder. But, yeah, you went with Van Ness. Talk to me about Van Ness here for the Packers.
Yeah, for himself and for the team, they really need Van Ness to emerge, right? Obviously, 13th overall pick a couple of years ago, and he's only got a 58.4 PFF grade through his first 2 seasons and only 42 total pressures through his first 2 seasons. Now, when you look at the Packers' pass rush metrics as a team, they're relatively average last year, but most of that was Jeff Hafley creating it and getting aggressive with blitzes, sending guys like Edgerrin Cooper and DBs and things like that. When the Packers didn't blitz last year, they were 28th in the NFL in pass rush grade. So it's obviously not just Van Ness, right? They need Rashawn Gary to be better. They need Devontae Wyatt to be better, guys like that. But Van Ness, as a third-year player, former 13th overall pick, he's got to be better than he's been. He's got to show you some level of explosiveness off the edge so this team can sometimes rush 4 and help out in coverage, especially now with Jair Alexander gone at corner. I think you're talking about a team that their pass defense is my biggest concern, and a huge problem is that Rashawn Gary has not been the same since coming back from his knee injury, and Lucas Van Ness has just not shown you a whole lot through 2 seasons. So I know he's a guy that gets a lot of criticism around Green Bay, but I think rightfully so when you look at how quiet he's been over his first 2 years, and this team needs to be able to get home without blitzing as often as they do.
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of candidates here for the Packers. I think I totally agree with all the points that you made on Van Ness. Like, he's got to have a better year, and he's got to be a difference maker along that defensive line. But, man, you got a couple of players. I think Dontavian Wicks, 29, drop grade last year because of 9 drops, 18% drop percentage. I mean, that is just straight up not good enough to be in an NFL lineup. Like, you cannot be that unreliable. Contested catches, 25%. It's got to be so much better for a guy who they were hoping could be a deep threat for them. And so I think it's a make or break year for him because not only is that wide receiver room crowded right now, I think that they get very cutthroat with who the wide receivers are on this team outside of, I would say, Jaden Reed and Matthew Golden. I think they get very cutthroat and very bottom line next offseason. If you are not somebody who is producing for them, they are going to move on. They're going to change things, and I think you need to do that when you have a quarterback as talented as Jordan Love. I'll go to the secondary as well, with them moving on from Jair Alexander. Big year for Keyshawn Nixon, certainly as their guy moving forward. Big year for Nate Hobbs as well. Like, are the cornerback bets that you made the right ones? I think that when they signed Nate Hobbs, it was like, okay, Nate Hobbs can play in the slot for us. But with Jair Alexander now not on the team, Nate Hobbs has to play outside for you, because I think what they're going to do is they're going to allow John Bullard to play box safety. They're going to allow him to play slot safety as a nickel defender, and that's going to push Hobbs outside. So I think a lot of people looked at this and they were like, okay, we like the Hobbs signing because in theory it's got Jair on the outside, Keyshawn Nixon's on the outside, Hobbs can play on the inside. We got a really good secondary there, and maybe they feel just as good about it with Hobbs playing on the outside. Maybe this is the plan all along, but it's kind of a make or break situation here, because he's got to show that he can play well as an outside corner, because if not, then you've got to get, like, Carrington Valentine's got to step up, maybe Kalen King, although he has really struggled over the last couple of years, not only last year in the NFL, but also his last year when he was at Penn State. And so you're asking a lot. You're asking a lot of these corners, and I think a couple of these guys have good opportunities, but I feel like it's make or break, because if these guys don't show up, then you got to fix that cornerback room pretty quickly next offseason. Houston Texans, you went with offensive lineman Titus Howard. I think the offensive line just in general in Houston, it's make or break for a lot of those guys who are either on kind of rookie deals, one-year deals, flyers, whatever you want to call it. I think the whole offensive line there in Houston is in a little bit of a make or break situation, but you ultimately went with the guy who has been there the longest, who feels like he has been their best outside of Laramie Tunsil, who is no longer on the team. So why'd you go with Titus Howard here?
So this is the funny part, is he has been their best outside of Laramie Tunsil. He's the highest graded returning offensive lineman for the Texans this year, albeit at just a 70 PFF grade last year. The part that stresses me out is kind of the splits of who is going to play where. And Titus Howard, he's got a lot of experience in his career at tackle and at guard, but with them bringing in Cam Robinson, they have Blake Fisher, they've got a boatload of other options they've been messing around with on the offensive line. But there's a concerning split for me with Titus Howard, because it looks more likely that he's going to play guard. Here's the problem. When he's played tackle in his career, which is right around 3,000 snaps, 73 PFF grade. When he's played guard, and there's over 1,500 snaps of a sample to this, he's got a 46 PFF grade. He's better at tackle than he is at guard, and yet they're probably going to start him at guard because they don't have a whole lot of other great options out there. We know, look, this Texans offensive line is going to stress us out all season trying to protect C.J. Stroud, but I'm a little worried about Howard transitioning inside full-time when we have seen on over 1,500 snaps that he's better at tackle than he is at guard, and there's already issues at tackle now that Tunsil's been traded. You've got Cam Robinson, who's a stopgap. Blake Fisher struggled in his rookie season. Got a whole lot of other interior options that we don't really know what to expect from them, right? A lot of veteran guys who have struggled throughout their careers. So I think Titus Howard, once again, has to be their best offensive lineman. I'm just not entirely sure he's going to do that from one of the two guard spots.
Yeah, it's hard to look at the rest of their lineup outside of the offensive line and think that there's another candidate here. I mean, it's basically a make or break whoever you want to list off on the offensive line. Cam Robinson, you mentioned he's been a little bit of a journeyman playing it with the Jacksonville Jaguars and then with the Minnesota Vikings. Now he's with Houston. It's kind of a make or break situation for him in his career, whether or not he's just going to be a swing backup offensive tackle or whether or not he could be a starting caliber offensive tackle. I think Blake Fisher has a great opportunity to become a starting offensive tackle in the NFL, and he's got that good opportunity there. And then, figuring it out between Ed Ingram, Juice Scruggs, Ariante Ursary, Laken Tomlinson, Jarrett Patterson, like who is manning the rest of those spots along the offensive line? It's basically a make or break year for a lot of those guys there. The Indianapolis Colts.
I had to do it to you. We all
know what this one is. This isn't your anti-Anthony Richardson agenda here. It's just the truth. It's the truth. Anthony Richardson has to be the choice for the make or break season here, because if he cannot, not only ability, right? We've heard that he's already got the shoulder injury that's kind of keeping him out from some rep. Like, this guy's got to be healthy. It is just as much availability make or break for Anthony Richardson than it is the talent at all. So if he has a season where he is either knocked out from injury once again, or if he plays and it's not up to where they need it to be, they will move on. Someone will give Anthony Richardson another shot, but I can't imagine that if this is his last year in Indianapolis, for whatever reason that ends up being, the next situation that he is going to be a compete for a starting job at best. At best. So this is a major make or break season for Richardson, who could either be the Colts starting quarterback of the future or out of the league a lot sooner than we thought that he might be. So I agree with you. This is probably the biggest make or break of any player here on this list.
I mean, honestly, it might be a make or break preseason for him, if we're being honest. And right now, you mentioned the shoulder issue. He's going back to the same surgeon to get his shoulder re-examined that he had the surgery on last year. And you're looking at a guy right now who's losing reps to Daniel Jones, who, look, isn't great, but he's a veteran who's started plenty of games in the league. And I think he can run Shane Steichen's offense. And there's no timetable for when Richardson might get back on the field, if he'll be out there in time for training camp or the preseason or what have you. So, I mean, it might not even just be a make or break preseason. It might just be a make or break summer for Richardson if he can't get back and win the job over Daniel Jones. You mentioned it as a former 4th overall pick. This would be kind of one of the biggest draft busts in recent memory, and we just haven't seen him enough to know what he can be or what he can develop into. We knew he always needed reps to get better, but he's not even getting the reps now with the shoulder injuries. And I think you're looking at a player who, you're right, the Colts, if this doesn't work this year, they're just going to get out of him, and we're going to expect them to draft a quarterback, I think, in the first round next year, unless they really feel like Daniel Jones can be their guy, but I would highly doubt that. It just feels like the window is getting shorter and shorter for Richardson to do something with his NFL career. He needs to get over this shoulder injury and play in training camp and in the preseason to try to compete for this job.
For the Jacksonville Jaguars, you went with their cornerback Tyson Campbell, one of the more talented players that we have there on the roster, somebody who they would like to build their secondary around. So why Campbell as the choice here for Jacksonville?
Yeah, I mean, the low-hanging fruit here was Trevor Lawrence, obviously. There's a lot of people, jumping on Trevor Lawrence's back, and I think, you come back with Brian Thomas and Travis Hunter and see where it goes. I could have gone maybe with their right tackle, Anton Harrison, but you look at Tyson Campbell, he just, he signed a contract extension. He's going into the first year of it, making $19 million a year, right? But the last 2 years, he hasn't necessarily justified that. In 2022, when they made the playoffs, he had an 80 coverage grade, which is obviously really good. The last 2 years, it's been a 60.3, and this Jaguars team has struggled in coverage. Now, is that all on him? Absolutely not. The entire unit was a disaster, especially last year, but if you're going to get paid $19 million out there a year as a corner, you got to be a star, and a 60 coverage grade is not that. They need Tyson Campbell to play like the best player in that secondary. They still might have some issues at safety because they didn't do a whole lot to fix that. Maybe Travis Hunter works in at corner as well. They got Jordan Lewis, Jerryon Jones too, if he's moving back to safety or still playing in the slot or where he's going. But the idea of this secondary is that Tyson Campbell's a star. Maybe Travis Hunter's a star. We'll see where that goes. And then the rest just kind of falls in line. But right now, the last 2 years, he hasn't necessarily played like that contract extension is justified. So if he can get back to that 80 coverage grade or somewhere in that neighborhood, then you start to think about, okay, he's worth that money. But Tyson Campbell's got to be a lot better for this Jags secondary to improve.
I'll go with the offense. I'll go with two of the offensive tackles too. I think that Walker Little and Anton Harrison. Now Walker Little's got better PFF grades. He had run blocking and pass blocking grades above 70 last season, so that was good for him as a left tackle. He got the extension last year, but he got the extension from a coaching staff and a front office that is no longer there. Anton Harrison going into the third year of his rookie contract, and his PFF grades got a little bit better last year, but they really need to take a leap. Like, he still has yet to have an overall grade above, I think, any category, pass blocking and run blocking, above 66. So 65.9 as a pass blocker last year is the best mark that he has had in either category over his first 2 years in the league. So you really want him to take a big step up, get into that 70 range, be a really solid starting offensive tackle for you in his third year in the league. So I think it's a little bit of a make or break situation there for him and for Walker Little, who it's not do or die. Like, it's not like either of these guys are in contract years, but again, this is a new coaching staff. This is a new front office. They haven't coached these guys, and they didn't draft these guys. So to me, when you bring up Trevor Lawrence's name, I agree with you. It's make or break for Trevor Lawrence to continue to be consistent and play at a higher level consistently. But I think it's also going to be a make or break evaluating what's in front of him as well. So I think that this front office and this coaching staff is going to take a good hard look at the guys that are protecting Trevor Lawrence and saying, do we need to make changes next offseason? Do we really need to figure this out immediately before maybe some of these contracts end? And so I think it's a big year for those offensive tackles there as well. Speaking of offensive tackles, offensive linemen just in general at this point, Kingsley Suamataia, he was an offensive tackle last year. They're hoping that he kicks inside and he earns one of those guard spots with Joe Thuney no longer on the team. They're hoping he can fill that with Trey Smith and Creed Humphrey still remaining on that interior offensive line. So I think it's a little bit of an obvious with a make or break with him having the opportunity to start at offensive tackle last year and he couldn't cut it. Now they're sort of moving him into the inside. But talk to me about Kingsley as a choice here for the Chiefs.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it. Short work last year, but a 37.9 PFF grade, which obviously you can't have out there as a starter if he's going to play like that. Really struggled in pass protection. I think it's kind of just like you mentioned, representative of the whole unit right now, Trev. I mean, you've got Josh Simmons, who was a first-round pick coming off an injury. Jalen Moore got a $15 million a year contract and good part-time work with the Niners last year, had a handful of good starts. There's even rumors lately that Jawan Taylor at right tackle, that his job might not be safe. So I think it's really this entire Chiefs offensive line is probably the make-or-break part of this team. When you look at pass protection, obviously Creed Humphrey's great. Trey Smith is going to be solid, even though he's not on a long-term deal yet. I think we're going to be looking at this unit as what makes or breaks this Chiefs team. Rashee Rice getting back healthy, Xavier Worthy in year 2. I think the receiving core is going to be better than last year. Maybe you get a bounce back from Travis Kelce as well, but if you can't block for Patrick Mahomes, even the great Patrick Mahomes needs an offensive line, there's at least 3 spots on this offensive line that I'm a little bit worried about right now. And Suamataia at left guard, the biggest one after you lose the best pass protecting guard in football in Joe Thuney.
All right, halfway done. We got the Las Vegas Raiders coming up next. We're talking about these make-or-break players here. But before we get to that, got to talk to all the parents out there and ask them a question. What does your child's future success look like for you? Is it them traveling the world? Is it them owning their own business? Maybe they just own their own house. Beautiful family, whatever that looks like. And you can help them achieve that with a kids investment account from Fabric by Gerber Life. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With this kids investment account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. Your kids can't invest while they're minors, but this kids investment account allows you to invest on their behalf, gives their investment so much more time to grow. The funds can be used for anything. Like, it's not just, okay, we're throwing some funds in there. It's when they're older, when they're younger. It's tuition, it's tutors, it's sports, it's music classes, things like that. And then if you hold on to that and you let that grow when they are older, maybe it is helping them to start their own business, buy their first house, their first car, travel the world, whatever that looks like. It starts at just $20. There's no contribution limits to it, tax advantages, funds are SIPC insured up to $500,000. There's no commission fees to it. Just a low flat monthly maintenance fee. The whole thing is online. Setting up the account could take as little as just 5 minutes. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family and start investing in your child's future today at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. MEET fabric.com/PFFNFL. The portfolios are managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. You can learn more at meetfabric.com. For the Raiders, you went with your boy, edge rusher Malcolm Kuntz. If it's a big year for him, I think that certainly with Pete Carroll there now, I mean, I think the defense really gets to take a step up. Tyree Wilson, obviously, I think is somebody who you could put on this list as well. Had a really nice second season in the NFL. First season was rough for him, but played more snaps, had more production, better baseline from him, especially as a run defender. We're still looking for him to take that leap as a pass rusher, but it's well within the realm of possibility that could be here in his third year in his rookie contract. But you ended up going with Malcolm Kuntz. So why is Kuntz the guy here for you with the Raiders?
I think he's the guy, one, because he's on a one-year contract that he signed, because he didn't play a single snap last year, suffered a knee injury in the preseason, and then didn't play a snap last year. But you look at the second half of 2023, he had the 9th best pass rush grade in football at 84.9, and it looked like the Raiders maybe finally had that pass rush duo, somebody to go along with Max Crosby. I know you mentioned, I think Tyree Wilson's a great call too. The theme is they're looking for somebody else to get the triple teams off of Max Crosby and get another effective pass rusher in there. I went with Kuntz because, one, we've seen it before, and two, he's on a 1 year, I believe, $12 million contract to really prove it. Come back healthy, prove you can be that guy. If it's him, if it's Tyree Wilson, whoever can just take some of the pressure off of Crosby and get him some one-on-ones or win some one-on-ones on the other side, it's going to be big. I think even in the interior, Christian Wilkins is the guy, the big money free agent from last year who didn't play a whole lot due to injury. I think he's on that list too. So, you could call it a group effort with the rest of this defensive line, but I wanted to highlight Kuntz. I think he's really good if he's healthy. He's just got to get back from the knee injury and be that number 2 option for him off the edge.
I think Eric Stokes too, right? 1-year deal for Eric Stokes and former first-round pick. His coverage grades were fine in the years where he was mostly healthy. Let me make sure that I have these snap counts right. Yeah, I mean, in years in which he has had over 250 coverage snaps, his rookie year, he earned a 67.1 coverage grade. Okay, that's certainly fine for a rookie. That next year after that, took a step back, 60.3. 2023, he had spent a lot of time hurt, so we didn't even log more than 70 coverage snaps there. But then last season, 398 coverage snaps, 62.4 coverage grade. Okay, it's not the best, but now he has an opportunity. He signed a 1-year deal with the Raiders to basically say, like, yeah, I could prove myself as a starting cornerback in the league. And I think that if he doesn't do it here, it's going to be hard for him to prove that anywhere else. Like, he's going to be signing a series of 1-year deals. So I think this is a make or break year for him because he's got the opportunity to, because the Raiders need him to. And I think it's just an all-encompassing make or break for that entire situation there. So I want to throw out Stokes as well, who is also in that 1-year contract deal. Los Angeles Chargers, I think you went with the obvious one here, and I can't fault you for it. It's Quentin Johnston. It's a situation where there have been moments with Quentin Johnston, but it's just been moments. It has not been consistent enough, certainly to live up to a first-round selection of a wide receiver, but also just sort of where this team is going. Now you have Ladd McConkey that you feel very comfortable about, and I think that the offense just in general is going to move forward with or without Quentin Johnston. I think this year is the big year for them to say, like, hey, is he going to be somebody that we're going to have in our plans moving forward or not? So you went with Quentin Johnston. Talk to me about him here with Los Angeles.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize till looking at this, and we knew it's been rough, and he had a 68 receiving grade last year. A couple of big games carry that, but I think that's the problem is inconsistency. Trev, he's played 33 games in his career. He's only racked up at least 60 receiving yards in 3 of them. Only 3 times he's gotten at least 60 yards. I mean, for a guy who's supposed to be a size and speed big play guy, you would think he would run into more home runs, and he just hasn't. And you got to remember, too, you mentioned McConkey, and you mentioned where kind of Johnston is in his career. They just drafted a player in the second round in this year's draft in Trey Harris, who has kind of a similar skill set to Johnston, and if he's better in that role, that same X kind of size speed role, they'll start Trey Harris over Johnston if he proves that he's better, because Johnston just hasn't been consistent enough. He hasn't been able to separate, hasn't been able to catch the football well enough, and obviously have to do that on the outside. This is really the moment for Quentin Johnston to prove that he's a foundational piece of this team or not, because he may be out of there at this time next year if he doesn't prove that.
Kevin in the chat's saying, what about Zion Johnson? I think that's an interesting call out there. Is Zion Johnson going to play center for you? Is he going to play guard? I think that you've got to think about sort of maybe a switch of positions. Maybe that goes into it being a little bit of a make or break. I think Zion Johnson's been fine, right? I think Zion Johnson has been fine for them. It's sort of just, do you think that there's more in the tank? Do you think that he needs to play better? I think that it's fair to want him to play better, but I don't know if this is make or break. I think that they're still happy with him as part of this offensive line, but maybe Kevin is shouting it out. Crap. What do you think, Zion Johnson? Do you think it's make or break for him, especially with the talk of him moving to center? What do you think?
I don't necessarily think it's make or break. I think that's just what you have. Maybe it's disappointing considering he was another first-round pick, that he's been kind of an average player, but I think if you've got the 2 stars at tackle and you've got Becton at right guard and Johnson is just decent, I don't think it's make or break. I think that's more of a situation where we kind of know what he is at this point, right? Maybe he won't be a superstar like you hope a first-round pick would be, but he's been a decent starter, and if he continues to be that, I don't really see much of an issue.
For the Los Angeles Rams, staying in the city of Los Angeles, you went with offensive tackle Alaric Jackson, a move where when he signed the 3-year deal this offseason, you praised that as such a big-time move for them, as somebody who keeps that offensive line really rock solid and how he has played over the last couple of years. But this offseason is reported that he is once again dealing with blood clots, and he missed 8 games in 2022 dealing with blood clots as well. So this is the second time that he has dealt with that. The thought process, at least from what I had read from Ian Rappaport's reports on NFL.com, is that he will play in the 2025 season, but you just don't know. And with him now dealing with blood clots for the second time, you just hope that he is fully healthy. But was that really the catalyst of why he was making this list for you here?
Yeah, if that news hadn't come out, it would not have been Jackson, because I really like him as a player. But the problem is you're talking about a Rams team that had the third worst pass blocking grade in the league last year, and with an aging quarterback in Matthew Stafford. Look, when he's in a clean pocket, he's still one of the best quarterbacks in football, and when he's under pressure, he was one of the worst last year, passing grade in the 30s. This pass protection, this offensive line is going to be the difference in whether or not the Rams are a Super Bowl contender or not. And now, I would argue your best offensive lineman, your starting left tackle, $19 million a year, Alaric Jackson, has this issue for the second time in his career. If he misses a significant amount of time, this is a problem, because I think their pass protection is the key to the whole thing. When Stafford is protected, the games last year where they protected him, they won, and he was a monster, right? The games where they didn't, you saw it in the very last game at the end against Philadelphia. They couldn't block on the inside. They couldn't block Jalen Carter. It fell apart because they fell apart under pressure. So I think this is huge. I think the timing of when Jackson gets back and how effective he can be could be the key to their entire season. We've got some issues in their secondary, too. On defense, there's a couple other guys I'm sure you could call out in the back seven, but I think now this is what I'm watching for the most, is how their pass protection holds up without Jackson and when he's going to get back and how good is he going to be.
Before we move on to the next team, Kevin, given some extra context, for Zion Johnson when he was bringing up Zion Johnson being a make or break, I guess you were right. They did not pick up the fifth-year option on him. They declined that fifth-year option, so I suppose it maybe is a little bit more of a make or break there, especially with him potentially switching positions, that going into it. Maybe it is more of a make or break than we thought. For the Miami Dolphins, you went with their quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa, and I do certainly agree with you there. This is the last year in which Tua is not really movable at all whatsoever. So they have him for 2025. There's no question about it. If they were to cut him next offseason, they still take on dead money, but it's only $22 million. And I say only $22 million, and maybe before that would have scared some people off, but as we've seen as of late, it feels like teams are not afraid to take on a ton of dead cap if they believe that's what the best move is for improving their quarterback position. And so $22 million kind of feels like chump change at that point if you don't think that Tua Tagovailoa is your guy moving forward. To be honest with you, Dalton, I think this is a great choice, not just for Tua and certainly him being healthy long-term and making it through a full season and sort of where he is with his contract and all of that, but I think it is a make or break year for the entire Miami Dolphins organization. With their general managers, with their total front office, with their coaching staff, with the roster as it's currently constructed, everything. And certainly anytime that that's the case, you're centered around the quarterback position. But to be honest with you, I think it's a make or break for every single person that is employed by the Miami Dolphins right now.
I think that's a great call. I was just thinking the same thing. And I think if I was just going to ask you, does it feel like they're the most make or break team in the NFL this year? And I would agree with that. Yes. I mean, and I think even in a player sense, it's a combo between Tua and this offensive line. You could pick out Patrick Paul or James Daniels or Jonas Savaianea or whoever on this offensive line. Because we have to remember, even with Teron Armstead last year, and now he's retired, they were 20th in the league in pass blocking grade. It's kind of a similar situation as we have in Houston, where you weren't good already, and now you've lost by far the best player in that unit, and you've got a quarterback that's only played 17 games once in his career, right? When he's healthy, Tua's pretty good. And even that year he was healthy in 2023, an 88.6 passing grade. We have seen him have success. The problem is he hasn't been on the field enough, and when he's not on the field, the Dolphins absolutely sink. So I think between the pass protection and Tua's health, and then the effectiveness of him being on the field for the full 17 and playing well behind this offensive line, it's really, you're right, it's a make or break for the entire organization, but it always starts with the quarterback. If he gets hurt again behind this offensive line this year, things could go south really quick for Miami.
For the Minnesota Vikings, you went with another newcomer here, somebody that they signed in free agency, defensive tackle Javon Hargrave, who, man, there was a, 4 or 5 year stretch there where he was one of the best pass rushing interior defenders that we had in the NFL, and he was still solid in that category last year, above the 73 pass rush grade. But over those last 4 or 5 years, those run defense grades have been very poor from him. And so if you're a one-dimensional player, that's fine as long as that one dimension is really, really good. And for the majority of the last 4 or 5 years, it has been for Hargrave. But now that he's more over 32 years old, Is he still the pass rusher he needs to be to make up for him being a liability in run defense? I can see why you had him here, but talk to me about Hargrave being your pick.
Yeah, I think when you talk about, too, last year, his year was cut very short due to, I believe it was a torn triceps, right? And he didn't play a whole lot, so he didn't really get to rack up and get in a rhythm with the pass rushing throughout the whole season. And look, last year, Minnesota had the 5th worst pass rush grade from their defensive tackles. It's part of the reason that, look, Brian Flores is going to blitz a lot anyway. He led the league in blitz rate, but maybe you could do it a little bit less if you have a guy like Hargrave, and they brought in Jonathan Allen too. But you mentioned it, from 2021 to 2023, this guy was top 4 across the board in all the pass rush metrics for defensive tackles, right up there with Chris Jones and Dexter Lawrence and Quinnen Williams and all of those guys up near the top, right? He was one of the elite pass rushers in football. If you get a healthy version of that you can rotate in there, and he's a top 5 pass rushing defensive tackle, you've changed the entire complexion of this defensive line. So it's a matter of him coming back off the injury, given the numbers, or at least something close. Even if he's not a top 5 guy, if he gives you a top 15 interior pass rusher, you've got a major improvement from what they had last year, because there just wasn't enough on the inside to only send 4, and that's why Brian Flores was leading the league in blitz rate last year.
Does it feel far too early to say that with Dallas Turner? That it's make or break year? Did you think about him at all whatsoever here for the Vikings?
You could think about it, but I think also they're deeper off the edge, right? They've got Van Ginkel, they've got Grenard. They can use Turner in more of a flex role and bring him along like slower. They didn't use him enough as a starter or as a starter at all really last year to say, oh, this guy's a lost cause or anything, or he's really in a make or break. I think they're just bringing him along slower within the system because they've got Van Ginkel and Grenard. That might be a conversation we have next year with Turner instead, because I think Van Ginkel's in the last year of his contract, so you might see Turner transition into a starting role in 2026, and we'll talk about that next year.
For the New England Patriots, you went with their interior offensive lineman, Cole Strange. Now, I think that with new coaching staff, just a new outlook on this entire team and on this roster, there's a lot of players that were certainly brought in from not this regime. Well, I should say just not this coaching staff, that you might look at and say, hey, their time might not be long for this roster here. Ultimately, you went with the former first-round pick in Strange. Talk to me about Cole Strange being your pick here.
Yeah, look, we're going to talk a lot about this Pats offensive line, right, because it was so bad last year. Will Campbell's coming in at left tackle. It's possible that we see another rookie at center in Jared Wilson, right? We're going to talk about, is Drake May protected enough? But Cole Strange, a guy coming off, I believe it was an ACL injury, only played 2 games last year and played them at center. I'd assume he's going to move back to left guard this year. And 2 years ago, at a 64.6 PFF grade. But we got to remember, surprising as it was, he was a first-round pick. So this is somebody they need to be a solid starter for. As much as we're going to hear about some of the rookies, all the young guys throughout this team, Strange is still another one, right? Still in his rookie contract, trying to establish himself. They need him just as much as they need a guy like Will Campbell to emerge as a solid player, too, to protect Drake May. So we're going to be talking about this offensive line a lot, and I don't think we can forget the Strange is in that mix.
I think Jalen Polk has to also be talked about here in this conversation, right? Because as much as, again, like it's a rookie season, and so when you don't have a good rookie season, you don't want to absolutely kill a guy like former offensive lineman for the Bucs, Ian Beckles, who used to go on a show when I lived in Tampa. He used to always, just sort of like laugh when I was as a draft guy. I'd talk about all these rookies and like how great they're going to be immediately and all this kind of stuff. And he's like, Trev, rookies suck. Like, that's it. Like, rookies suck until they don't, basically. And so if you don't have a good rookie season, like, it's understandable. You're jumping to the pros for the first time, and 45.4 receiving grade for Jalen Polk, their second-round pick last year. It's not ideal. It's not a kiss of death. But here's the thing. Like, here is why I do actually think it's a make-or-break year for Jalen Polk. Look at all the new receivers that they have with this new coaching staff. They brought in Stephon Diggs, they brought in Mac Hollins, they drafted Kyle Williams, they brought in Elfton Chisholm as well. Like, all of these guys that were still there, Pop Douglas, Jalen Polk, Javon Baker, Kayshon Boutte, like all of those guys, they're on the hot seat. Now, some of the seats are more hot than others. Like, again, like I think that Pop Douglas has sort of had his production. It's like he's got a much longer leash than the rest of these guys. But it's a different coaching staff. It's a completely different coaching staff. And if Polk had a bad year last year, and if he falls out of grace with this current coaching staff, I mean, you will see them try to move on from him pretty quickly if that's the case. They've just got other receivers that they brought in immediately. So I do think I don't want to be too harsh on him having a bad rookie year, but the situation, if he does not play significantly better, they have already brought in 4 or 5 new names at the receiver position, and it will not get easier for him the longer time moves on if he doesn't play better.
There's a chance that him and even Javon Baker, that unless they have a great training camp, there's a chance neither one of them make the roster, because you just mentioned a bunch of names. That look, Stephon Diggs is going to be on the roster, Mac Hollins, Kayshon Boutte played better down the stretch last year. I think he's going to make it. Pop Douglas has been solid. And Kyle Williams, obviously, is a second, third round pick. That's 5 guys already there that I think very well could be in better standing than both Polk and Javon Baker. And you've mentioned it with somebody with another team. They're not tied to this regime. Right, Mike Vrabel didn't draft these guys. He don't give a rip. He's trying to put the best players on the field. There's a chance that right now that Jalen Polk and Javon Baker are 6 and 7 on this depth chart, and usually 6 and 7. If you're carrying a 6 receiver, it's for special teams purposes, and if you're not, then those guys are going to be off your 53. So not even the whole season, but for those 2 guys, it might be training camp and preseason, even though they're going into year 2.
I agree. Speaking of an interesting situation that's sort of along those same lines, the New Orleans Saints with Trevor Penning. What are we doing here with Trevor Penning? Moving from offensive tackle into interior offensive line starting spot to try to get some sort of value of him. Now, this is an interesting case because this is not the coaching staff that drafted Trevor Penning, but it is still the front office that drafted Trevor Penning in the first round a handful of years ago. And so I think that he's on the last year of his contract anyway, so it's make or break sort of no matter how you look at it. But this is, to me, the obvious candidate here for the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, can he win what looks like a left guard job that he's going to be competing with Dylan Radunz, right? Can he win that job? Can he be better on the inside? And can he just pass protect better, right? They're going to go with Banks and Fuaga, obviously, at tackle, but the big problem for Penning is pass protection. We know he can run block. He's aggressive. He's always been like that, even back to his days at Northern Iowa, but you're talking about a guy who allowed the second most pressures in the NFL last year with 54. So if he can be better on the inside, at least a stable presence at guard, they declined the 5th-year option, but then maybe, you could extend him beyond that and give him at least a reasonable contract. If he can't do that and he can't pass protect on the inside, he's probably going to be out of New Orleans after this year, but he's going to get a shot to win this left guard job and see if there's a better fit there on the inside.
I looked to see what Chase Young's contract was while you were talking, because I'm like, Chase Young, like that could be an answer there. Chase Young is under contract this year. Chase Young is under contract this year, okay? His cap number is $6.8 million.
Okay.
In 2026, his cap hit jumps to $20.5 million.
That's that New Orleans negotiating right there.
In 2027, it jumps to $23.6 million.
Yep.
And then he proceeds to have 4 void years on the end of those deals. So technically, Chase Young is under contract until 2031.
They are the kings of sweeping it under the rug. That is all you did was just point out that's the New Orleans Saints MO right there. Just sweep it under the rug and we'll worry about it in 2031. I forget what decade. When they're pushing contracts like Chase Young's to the next decade, that tells you how they do things down there. Are they still paying Drew Brees? They might still be paying Drew Brees. I don't even know.
I actually don't know. Are they paying Drew Brees?
They might still be paying him for all we know. They just keep pushing. Everything's just we'll deal with it next year. It's fine.
They are not.
Oh, okay. They're finally not paying Drew Brees.
Yes.
Okay.
The dead money that I have here is he's not on this list.
Okay.
They are still paying Michael Thomas, Jameis Winston, and they're also paying Marshawn Lattimore, but that was a trade last year.
Jameis has been on like 4 other teams since then, and the Saints are still paying him? Jeez.
Not only are they still paying him, they're still paying him $7 million. At least that's a dead money charge.
If I was making $7 million on dead money from somebody, I'm not sure I'd be playing. I don't even know if I'd bother. Well, that's good enough for me. That's fine.
All right, New York Giants. I agree with this one here. Kayvon Thibodeau. Certainly with them drafting Abdul Carter, we wondered if all right, so they're going to draft Abdul Carter. Are they trading Kayvon Thibodeau? I don't hate the idea of them keeping all of these guys this upcoming season because it is a make or break. But you want to talk about another make or break team. New York Giants, absolutely a make or break team. Like, who are we talking about? Oh, the Miami Dolphins. I mean, if this season does not go considerably in the right direction, everybody's gone in New York. They are totally fire sailing the front office, the coaching staff, and sort of who they're building this team around. So I think that there's big wholesale changes that could come if they don't play well. I'm not guaranteeing that the Giants are going to win the Super Bowl because they've got a deep defensive line like Max Chadwick did, obviously. I don't know if we still have the graphic on hand, but that would be hilarious if we did. But Kayvon Thibodeau, I do agree with you here that this is the make or break player here for the New York Giants.
There's a blueprint, right? That's what Max was going for. There's a blueprint. No, so it's funny because they actually picked up Thibodeau's fifth-year option, right? And I did, in a film breakdown, check it out, I did an Abdul Carter film breakdown. I kind of went over why Carter is so versatile in the Micah Parsons comps and why you could have the NFL's best NASCAR package when it comes to Brian Burns, Thibodeau, right, Carter, and Dexter Lawrence, and that being your four-man rush because Carter can move all over the formation. He can go over the center. He can stand up. He's a former linebacker. All the things you think about with Micah Parsons, it's not just that Carter can do all those things himself. It's that he makes everybody else around him better and allows everybody else like Thibodeau to fit in. Now, if Thibodeau doesn't play all that well this year, even with those circumstances, and the money's getting too much on that defensive line because they're paying a boatload of money on all across that defensive line, including Carter and Thibodeau, now you talk about Thibodeau as a guy who maybe next offseason gets traded because we have Abdul Carter and we still have Brian Burns, right? And now things are getting more expensive with the fifth-year option and figuring out things later. So I don't think it's necessarily a problem for the Giants to have all of these guys and then have your future with Abdul Carter as well. But for Thibodeau, he's really going to want to play well, A, to make money in the future, and B, just to figure out where he's at and if the Giants are going to want him, if they're going to want to trade him, or if we're going to keep riding out this contract the way it is.
I think the only other guy that I would really bring to the table for the Giants is maybe Deonte Banks, yep, right? Back-to-back seasons where hasn't had really solid coverage grade going in that third season there. I actually really, if you tell me that Banks is going to play a lot better this upcoming year, I think you really got to like New York's defense, or at least just the potential of it. So I would throw him out there as well. For your New York Jets, you went with Breece Hall, who surprisingly trade rumors about Breece Hall, right? I mean, just,
Aaron Glenn has recently shot that down. He told him, he was like, listen, you're not getting traded. You're going to be here this year, and we'll figure out the rest later.
Okay, all right. Because it felt a little weird there for a little bit. It felt a little non-committal with Breece Hall, who, boy, it just how quickly it can change in the NFL. I mean, it went from, wow, we're going to look at our great young offense that we have here, Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson as the cornerstones here, and then it was like, wait a second. Okay, now we're shipping one of these guys off. So you still went with Breece Hall here. Talk to me about Breece.
Yeah, no, it's clear. I mean, you got to remember, Trev, he's a second-round pick back in 2022, so he is entering the last year of his contract, doesn't have that fifth-year option. And last year, look, he put up a lot of yards, but it was also a career-low 62 PFF grade, 6 fumbles, 8 drops. There were times where he looked kind of checked out or out of focus, and it was really, and these are big mistakes. Drops and fumbles can cost you games, right? And that's the issue with Hall. We saw him get into more of a committee role with Braylon Allen emerging as a solid rookie last year. So I think this is really the year, especially for as much as the Jets are going to want to run the football with their offensive line, with the new coaching staff, with Justin Fields as their quarterback. They're going to want to run the football a lot. And Breece Hall, look, we know he's supremely talented. He's got the talent to be a top 5 or 6 back in this league, especially with his ability to catch the football as well. He can be a two-way dynamic threat. There's some people who think he can play kind of the Jahmyr Gibbs role in this offense that Aaron Glenn saw in Detroit so much. But I think you're talking about also a guy who, if he plays like he did last year and you've got fumbles and drops and focus issues, he's going to be out. They're going to find somebody else that fits the culture better and just can, recycle through. We always talked about, okay, should you really give running backs that second contract? This is a perfect example. Do you do it if Breece Hall comes out and has a mediocre year or a year like last year? Probably not, and they'll go and draft another one next year. So I think Breece Hall, of all of the Jets' young stars that they do have, it sounds like Garrett Wilson and Sauce Gardner are going to get extensions here pretty soon, but Breece Hall is the one who's going to have to play out this season and see where it goes.
Yeah, and then I think the other obvious one here in this situation is Justin Fields, right? And I think that it's Justin Fields for a handful of reasons, not only because I think that he's going to be the starting quarterback of this team, but I also think the offense is going to be built around him probably as best they possibly can, right? I look at this Jets team, and it's not like this pass-catching group is set up for them to really drop back 5-step, 7-step drops and air it out with a spread offense. Like, when I look at this team, I think they're going to run the football. I think they're going to run the football a lot. I think it's going to be a lot of RPO stuff. I think it's going to be a lot of option stuff. I think it's going to be a lot of design QB runs. I think it's going to be a lot of just like building things off of the rushing attack. Not that they're going to not let Justin Fields throw the ball. Obviously, they are going to, and they have to, but this offense, in my opinion, is going to lean into what Justin Fields does well. So he should look good this year because the Jets don't really have a reason to be stubborn against it. So whatever Justin Fields does best, it would behoove everyone involved if they lean into that. They don't have players under heavy contract that, especially in the passing game, that again, like are saying like, hey, we've got to throw the ball 50, 60 times a game. Like that's just not going to be the case in New York. So I think that it's going to lean into Justin Fields' strengths. And I think that if he is not able to play well this season with the Jets, especially with what we think is a pretty high potential offensive line, I just start to think that we don't really look at Justin Fields in that same light of like can be a starter, can win you games if he can't show it this season. So I think it's a make or break for him as well. This next one here with the Philadelphia Eagles, I take exception to this, my friend, as somebody who had Nolan Smith as a top 15 overall player in the 2023 NFL draft class. I am not going to stand for you saying that it is a make or break year for Nolan Smith. No, I actually do agree with you, though. I think it's a really good opportunity for him with the moving parts that they have. Josh Sweat's no longer there. With Hassan Reddick obviously no longer there. Like, it's just an opportunity for Nolan Smith to really step up as an impact edge defender for this team. So even though I would have liked for Nolan Smith to break out a little bit earlier than this, I do agree with you. I think it's a make or break situation for him.
Yeah, no, it's not at all that there's anything wrong necessarily with Nolan Smith. It's just that he's going to be in the spotlight as a starting edge defender now for sure. He started to get there the second half of last year when Brandon Graham was hurt. But you mentioned it. You're losing Josh Sweat. You're losing Brandon Graham. These are staples in this Eagles defense, and this is an edge defender group that's not all that deep right now behind Nolan Smith, at least with proven players. It's a very young edge group, and he was really good down the stretch last year. Last 7 games last year, a 78.9 PFF grade. He was spectacular in the playoffs and through into the Super Bowl as a pass rusher. Still, look, he's undersized, needs a little work in run defense. Can he be an every down player for the entire season? If he can, this may just be the best defense in football again, right? We've mentioned Denver before as a candidate, but really, right now, the belt belongs to the Eagles because they're not losing a whole lot and they keep recycling young talent in there, and Nolan Smith is one of those guys. We just got to see him as a full-time starter, 50, 60 snap a game guy for an entire season. There's a chance he could be a superstar, and this looks kind of stupid by the end of the year, but when we do these lists, I find with every single one of them that the Eagles are the hardest one because they're so darn good everywhere. So it's like, okay, who am I picking and prodding at to be a make or break guy? Because it just doesn't really feel like the Eagles are going to break this year, like they're going to step back and miss the playoffs. Now, Super Bowl champions is always the hangover, but they're so darn talented that it's like, who is really the maker? Is it Nakobe Dean coming off the injury with Jahad Campbell coming in? Is it, whoever's playing right guard for them? Is it Tyler Steen, somebody like that? So I went with Smith as a guy who I know he'll be on the field. He's just got to prove he can be a 17-game starter like that.
Yeah, two other players that I'll just shout out that I think you could have thought about here for the Eagles. I'll say Jalix Hunt as well, and I say Jalix Hunt because he actually has the opportunity with Brandon Graham gone and with Josh Sweat. Josh Sweat gone. Bryce Huff's no longer on the team. I know they kind of one in, one out with Josh Uche, and so he's still there. But Jalix Hunt has an opportunity to play as a rotational or even a starting edge rusher for them. And Hunt was somebody who, he was coming from a small school. He switched from safety to edge rusher in his college career. So it was always going to take a little bit of time from him. The worry, I think, with Jalix, and this is a little unfair of his situation because Philly is so loaded, is if he cannot sort of crack that starting lineup and that rotation at the very least this upcoming season, he's probably not going to get a ton of playing time moving forward throughout the course of his rookie contract in Philadelphia. Somebody's probably going to they're going to move on from him, and then does he really get that opportunity elsewhere from a team that didn't draft him, knowing that he doesn't have a ton of production, coming from a small school, switching positions midway through his college career like he did? And so this is somebody who I do think is very talented and could be a impact, or at least I'll say like rotational edge rusher in the NFL. It just gets a little tricky for him because he has the opportunity to stand out right now, and if he can't with this lineup, does he really get that chance elsewhere? I'm not sure. So I just want to shout him out there. And then Jahan Dotson, too. Just wide receiver 3 for this team. If he can continue to play really well, that's great. But if not, we know that Howie likes to keep his foot on the gas pedal with the Stars. Pittsburgh Steelers offensive tackle Broderick Jones is the player that you brought to the table. I totally agree with you. Like, this has to be the best year of Broderick Jones' NFL career already because they drafted this guy in the first round to be a offensive tackle that they would not have to worry about, and that has not been the case for them during halfway through his rookie contract. So I agree, it's got to be a big year from Broderick Jones.
It has to be. Honestly, him, and I'll combo it in with Troy Fautanu as well, as entering year 2, but hardly played last year due to a knee injury, and now they're switching sides. So now you're going to get Jones on the left side where he played in college, and Fautanu on the right side. And look, you mentioned it, this has to work. If this doesn't work at offensive tackle on either side for the Steelers, I really don't care who their quarterback is, because they're just not going to be able to protect him, right? And Broderick Jones has to be better. 58.5 PFF grade on the right side through his first 2 years, mostly on the right side, couple of games here and there on the left. But now you're getting him back at left tackle. If it doesn't work at what's supposedly his natural position, then it's not going to work, and they're going to head into year 4 of Broderick Jones and year 3 of Troy Fautanu having no idea who's blocking, whether it's for Aaron Rodgers or a new quarterback next year or what have you. The interior, I don't hate it with Zach Frazier, Mason McCormick in there as well, but the offensive tackle spot has been a huge problem in Pittsburgh for, it feels like, years on end, and if Jones doesn't fix that this year, then it's just going to continue into 26 and beyond.
San Francisco 49ers, kind of the obvious one here, right? It's Christian McCaffrey. Can he stay healthy? What's he look like if he does, right? When Christian McCaffrey's been fully healthy, Dalton, been one of the best offensive players in the game, no question about it. But unfortunately, more often than not, he's not fully healthy, at least for a full season. And the running back position, that's not kind to anyone that has sort of any injury history, and certainly the older that you get. So Christian McCaffrey, I would agree with you. I think that he's sort of the choice there. Sort of Brandon Ayuk as well, just because it's like, he's been coming off the injury. He didn't look the same. He's like all of this, like cryptic, like disgruntled. Even after he got the contract extension, it was like, okay, well, are we good? And it didn't feel like they totally were. So I would throw Brandon Ayuk there as well, but I can totally see why you have Christian McCaffrey here as the choice.
Yeah, it's the same theme. I mean, two guys that if they're back and healthy and playing the way we know they can play, this is absolutely a playoff caliber offense and a dangerous team to try to play against every week, right? I think McCaffrey more so. See, Ayuk is in his late 20s. He's in his prime. He can still come back and be solid, whether it's for San Francisco or somebody else. Look, McCaffrey's 30 years old now. 2022 and 2023, he was the highest graded running back in football. Last year, he barely played and didn't look great after he came back. He was dealing with injuries to both Achilles, right? And you look at him at his age and the amount of wear and tear that he's got on him and the number of injuries he's had in his career, and if he doesn't come back right this year, we really could be looking at the end of Christian McCaffrey. So the wide range of outcomes here, if McCaffrey's healthy and he's Christian McCaffrey, this is a team that can absolutely make the postseason and maybe even compete for an NFC West title. If not, that could be it. That could be the end of the Christian McCaffrey era. It could be over. So I think that wide range of outcomes in his age at his position changes the dynamic as opposed to picking a guy like Ayuk, who we think should be able to get back from an ACL, right? Pretty standard. A lot of years to go as a receiver. Just signed the contract. There's so much at stake here for both McCaffrey and the 49ers this season that, to me, that just felt like the obvious choice.
For the Seattle Seahawks, you went with offensive tackle Abraham Lucas, who has dealt with a chronic knee injury throughout his career. He said as the year ended last year that he felt as healthy as he ever has. I might be paraphrasing a little bit there, but he felt good. He said that he felt good. He felt confident about it going into this upcoming season. I think when both of those guys are out there, with him and Charles Cross, that is, Seattle feels pretty good about their bookend tackles. It's just a matter of, okay, Abraham Lucas is healthy now. Is that going to, are we going to get the rug pulled out from underneath us? And I think that's maybe the worry for the Seattle Seahawks. And so is injury the big reason why you went with Abraham Lucas here?
Yeah, pretty much. He's played over the last 2 years, he's played less than 700 snaps. So for as much as we've talked about the disaster last year that was the interior offensive line, they have an issue at right tackle also, because even when he's been in there, it's clear that he doesn't look right. 59.5 PFF grade over the last 2 seasons. It's not really starting caliber. It's not really what you want out of your starting right tackle, right? So Charles Cross is a stud, like you mentioned. They need Lucas to give him stability on the other side and just be out there for 17 games, because we know the interior is a work in progress. But if that's also the case at right tackle, then Sam Darnold's going to have a hard time succeeding in this offense.
Before we move on to the next team, hold on. Uncle Tom's in the chat saying, it's stupid to even think that Jalix Hunt could be a bust. He showed out as a rookie from Houston Christian. He's a stud in the making. Nothing last year showed anything other than that. When did I say he was a bust?
I don't think so. I mean,
I did not say he was a bust.
To get what they've gotten out of him already as a 4th or 5th round pick is spectacular. I think the only worry that I would have with that crew, there's a couple of things. One, you got to remember, they actually lost, we didn't mention him on the inside. They lost their highest graded pass rusher in Milton Williams to New England, right? So you lose that inside as well. And I think when you look at right now, if you're starting Smith and Hunt, that is 2 tiny edge defenders that you're looking at that you have to defend the run with, right? I think that's where the big, like if you get behind the Eagles, those 2 guys are coming flying off the edge. We already know that, but I would worry about early downs and run defense a little bit. Maybe obviously Jahad Campbell can play off the edge. Zach Bond can play off the edge. They've got a bunch of, they got a lot of depth to work with there, but that's the part where I would worry. But to call anybody, first of all, to call a 4th or 5th round pick a bust anyways, I mean, that's not really, it's not really a thing. I mean, you're getting something out of him already, right? So it's already been a good outcome.
Uncle Tom is saying that I called him a bust for bringing him up. He's saying that I called him a bust.
Well, that's fine. That's you then. I'm not worried about it.
I didn't. No. I didn't. I had Jalen Hunt top 100 on my board. I love Jalen Hunt. I felt like I was higher on Jalen Hunt than anybody. All I was saying is that you look at a situation in Philadelphia where they finally have an area where Jalen Hunt can actually, because I was worried about that. I like the fit in Philadelphia when he got drafted there in the 3rd round, but I was worried that a player who is a guy who's converting from safety to edge rusher played at Houston Christian, so he played at a small school program. Was he actually going to get the reps that he needed in Philadelphia? Because Philadelphia is super deep. My make or break, the reason why I brought him as a make or break candidate is because we know Nolan Smith's going to take one of those spots. Who's taking the other spot there with Brandon Graham and Josh Sweat gone? Because Nolan Smith, like I said, has one of them. And then it's one of Jalen Hunt, Josh Uche, Azeez Ojulari. You have Antoine Powell-Ryland as well. All of these guys are players who could take that spot potentially. So it was basically more of me saying, if he isn't a contributing or rotational player, I get worried that he's going to get lost because we know that Philadelphia is always looking to add edge rushers no matter what. And then if he ends up getting lost in Philadelphia's rotation or just on their depth chart, does another team look at him and go, yeah, small school guy, didn't really get the playing time in Philadelphia. I'm not saying that he's going to be a bust and he's not going to make it in the NFL. That was more me saying this is sort of his opportunity in Philadelphia to become a starting caliber player, because Philly doesn't wait on a lot of these guys. So that was, I in no way said that he was going to be a bust. It was just his situation in Philadelphia. It's one of the more impatient feels like the wrong word.
No, I think it's fluid. You're talking. I think you're saying it right. You have a guy who's basically, it's going to be decided this year. Is he a starter or is he a DPR? I think that's the 2 outcomes here, right?
Yes.
He's proven he's at least a solid football player in some sense as a pass rusher. It's just you're riding that fence. It's not the on or off the team fence that we've been riding with a lot of these guys. It's starter or not, which I think makes plenty of sense. But even on that team, they'll still find a role for him.
I love Jalen Hunt, just to be fair. It was more of his situation in Philadelphia. And if I didn't explain that correctly the first time, let those be the words that you remember. Jalen Hunt's my boy. I had him, again, top 100 on my big board in 2024. I think he's great. I just think that it's always tough to stick around in Philadelphia given how much talent they want on their defense at all times. And this is the year and the opportunity for him to really earn that and say, no. When you go into next offseason, you don't got to worry about this spot. Me and Nolan have it down. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Folgers in the chat was saying it's got to be Kalijah Cansey, right? It is Kalijah Cansey. You have Kalijah Cansey here as the make-or-break player here for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I would assume that sort of injury and availability go into this a good deal because he has missed time and he just has not been on the field a ton. But why did you pick Kalijah Cansey here for the Bucs?
It's that, but it's performance as well. And let's point out that obviously when you're an undersized defensive tackle from Pitt, there is going to be a certain expectation on you that is realistically unfair, right? But, he's got 85 pressures over his first 2 seasons. It's actually top 20 among all defensive tackles, but it's offset by, and this was the concern when he was drafted at, 280, 285, maybe somewhere he measured in there.
Yeah.
Can he hold up on early downs? Say again?
Was it less than that?
It might have been less than that. I mean, I know he was one of the lighter D tackles that we've seen.
281.
I mean, the issue was, okay, can he defend the run in the NFL? And so far, that's just not been the case. A 28.7 run defense grade through his first 2 seasons. That's bottom 5 in the NFL among defensive tackles. It's an unsustainable level of play, similar to what we talked about with Mozzie Smith. Now, Kancey's a much better pass rusher than Mozzie Smith, so that keeps him on the field, in those passing situations. But eventually, you're looking at this guy as a first-round pick and going, Can I have you out there every snap? I don't know that I can. With him being that undersized, you mentioned the injuries as well, and the struggles in run defense. I mean, there's certain teams they play against. I think about the Atlanta Falcons where I just go, he can't be out there. He just can't. Or even Carolina last year, their offensive line gave him a lot of problems too. He cannot be out there against those heavy running teams, and if that's the case, how much more of a role can he play as just a situational pass rusher? So I think this is a big year for Kancey, whether, if he's put on some size, if he's gotten better technique against the run, if he's healthy, he's got to be a more two-dimensional player, or he's going to not really have the career that they thought he would as a first-round pick.
The Tennessee Titans, you went with cornerback L'Jarius Sneed, who I agree was his first year in Tennessee last year after 4 years when he was in Kansas City. Really nice coverage grades for him during the first 4 years of his career, and didn't play a ton last year. I think he only played in, 5-6 games?
Five games, yeah.
Without question, his lowest single season coverage grade. It was and I just have this right here, a 36.8 coverage grade from somebody who has had 73.8, 75.7, 61.7, 71.2 single season coverage grades through the first 4 years of his career. He also played over 1,100 snaps in each of the previous 3 seasons and played just 301 last year. So I think plenty of reasons for L'Jarius Sneed to be the choice here, but I totally agree. This is somebody that you acquire to build your secondary around, and just availability and overall production from him just was not there in 2024.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. I mean, and he's obviously got to play more than 5 games and come back healthy off the injury, and that's why he's kind of a bounce-back candidate too, because we've seen him play better and that with such a long track record. And look, he needs to play better for the sake of continuing to play on that contract, and the Titans need him to play better because their cornerbacks were 27th in coverage grade last year, and they have an extremely young secondary. So it's going to be mutually beneficial if Sneed bounces back and he's healthy and he plays well, right? But this is somebody who, if he doesn't play well this year, especially as a physical man-to-man corner, if he's lost a step, and we know he's got a high amount of penalties in his career too, and that's always been in question with his coverage, but this is someone who really needs to extend his career with a good season here in Tennessee. I'm sure they'll gladly keep him around if he has a good year with as young as their team is, but he's got to be better than he was last year, and he's got to stay healthy through the whole season.
Drake shouting out Roger McCreary as well. I think Roger McCreary is on his last year of his deal. He is. 2025 is the last year of his rookie contract. And when you look at him, PFF coverage grades over the last 3 years, 60.4 as a rookie, 72.2 as a second-year player, and then last year, 58.4. So certainly a make-or-break season with him going into that contract year as well. Last team we had here, Washington Commanders. We brought up this player's name before earlier when we were talking about the dead money the New Orleans Saints are paying this player. It's Marshawn Lattimore. Marshawn Lattimore, the cornerback here, in a make-or-break situation. I agree because, I think for other teams, he might get a little bit more grace and have a little bit longer of a leash. But for Washington, they're on a rocket ship, man. And I understand that they traded for him last year, and it's like, hey, we traded for this guy. We want him to be a part of our secondary. But if he can't hold up his end of the bargain, they might just be like, okay, we have to move on. We have to upgrade. We are in a time period it is where time is of the essence. Off seasons are of the essence, if you will, with Jaden Daniels in this rookie contract, because if he continues to play the way that he did last year, I mean, he's going to be gunning for a contract that is the highest paid in all of the NFL. So you've got to maximize what he's able to bring to the table while he has that cost-controlled contract to him. And even though they paid a good amount in salary and in draft picks to go get Marshawn Lattimore, I agree with you. I mean, when he got to Washington, he was way too up and down, and if we're going to be honest, it was more down than you wanted to see from him, especially going up against Mike Evans, his rival and his foe, when they matched up in the postseason. So anyways, Marshawn Lattimore, your selection here. I do agree with you, but why did you pick Marshawn Lattimore as the make-or-break player?
Just had to bring up the Mike Evans, Marshawn Lattimore rivalry.
Yeah, of course, I always will.
Especially when Evans gets the best of it. But no,
we don't get enough of those. We don't get enough of those just hated rivalries in the NFL anymore, and so we gotta preserve and we gotta talk about the ones that we actually do see.
Oh, for sure, the individual rivalries are the best, but I think this is make or break in every sense. Like when you look at every angle of this, okay, the team needs him to play well because their cornerbacks were last in coverage grade last year. He came over and he had a hamstring injury and only played 5 games and put up a 40 coverage grade when he was with the Commanders, including that playoff game against Tampa where Mike Evans torched him. He's in his 9th year in the NFL as a corner. He's entering this year with he's got guaranteed money on his contract this year, but no more afterward, right? So he can he's most likely to be cut after this year, just because next year it's $18 million, I believe, that's not guaranteed to him. So he's really at a crossroads as a veteran cornerback of, look, if you don't play well this year, you'll still get a contract, you'll get a tryout, but we're kind of nearing a point where are you still effective enough to be a starting corner in this league? And then you look at if he does play well and he plays at least to the standard that he's played for most of his career, even if it's a coverage grade 70, 75, somewhere in there, look at how it changes this defense now. Now maybe you got him on the outside, you got Trey Amos on the outside, the second-round pick. Can you get Mike Sainristil still back in the slot where he's most comfortable? Then you have a good-looking secondary, but I think Lattimore is the X factor in all of it, especially with, look, their defensive line I still think might not be great this year, especially in the pass rush, but if you can get this secondary right and Lattimore's healthy and playing to his standard of what he's done the rest of his career, you've got a different defensive unit. But it's a huge question for him getting back healthy and having a good 9th season in the NFL now.
There we go. Every single team's make or break player, according to Dalton Wasserman, which you can see the article with even more PFF statistics and reasoning when it goes live on the website. You said on Tuesday, right? Tuesday is when it's going live? Tuesday's there. If you guys want to see the PFF statistics for yourself, do your own research and be able to come up with these topics and these players for yourself, going over to PFF.com, get yourself a PFF Plus subscription. That's how we build a lot of these opinions and a lot of the data that we're able to find on a lot of these players, how they perform throughout their careers, if they are in contract years, what they've been getting better at, what you can expect them to get better at, if they're legitimate make or break candidates, and so much more. If you're into the draft, if you're into fantasy football, whatever it is, a PFF Plus subscription has you covered. That's it for us for the live shows this week, but of course, we've got some great stuff coming on the channel for you over the next couple of days, some player breakdowns that we have seen throughout the course of this summer, and just a lot of other great stuff. Make sure that you are subscribed to the channel, liking all the videos. We would really appreciate it. That really helps us out. And we will be back with you next week on Next Monday for another live episode here. For Dalton Wasserman, I'm Trevor Sikkema saying thank you guys so much for watching and listening to another edition of the PFF NFL Show. See you guys next week.